Good evening and welcome to the Kaufman Corner. Back at it, as always, the good doctor, Dr. Rany Jazayerli, of course, co-author of Rob and Rany on the Royals, author of Rany on the Royals, one of the co-founders of Baseball Prospectus. My name is Soren Petro from Sports Radio 810 WHB in Kansas City. You can catch my show at 810WHB.com, afternoons 2 to 6. Rany, how are you? Mercifully, just 2 games left in the season. Are you ready for it to be done?
Um, it's really weird. I am very ready for the season to be over, and yet I'm also very excited to see what the offseason brings, and very much looking forward to next year, which is a sort of a strange, uh, a strange confluence of feelings. Um, we could be pessimistic on this show. We could talk about how the Royals have lost 95 games this year, marking the 10th time this century that they've lost 95 games. But I prefer to look at it as a positive. It is only the third time that they've lost 95 games, going back to 2011. After losing 95 games 7 times in 10 years, from 2001 to 2010, they've only done it 3 times in the last 12 seasons. So I prefer to look at it as progress. So good job, Kansas City Royals, and looking forward to more improvement next year.
We're going to talk hitting. We're going to talk prospects. Both Rany and I have created our dirty dozen, if you will, of the top 12 prospects that we think are there to be on the list. You've got to still be eligible for Rookie of the Year voting. So guys like Vinny Pasquantino and Michael Massey, and these guys are out. Right, you got to still be able to qualify for rookie status. So that's the deal on it. And so we want to dive into all that, but it is possible to make progress without the record getting better, right? Like this year didn't go the way anybody thought record wise. Is there any chance that you saw progress? And well, I know it'd be easy to just say, well, they changed the guy at the top, and so that's going to bring about change. But maybe it's as simple as that. But have you seen progress that you can absolutely put your arm around and say, okay, here's where this thing is going?
100%. I mean, I think if you had told me before the season the Royals would lose 95 games, um, I would be shocked at the level of optimism that I have for the future. And that's because if you're going to lose 95 games, this is the way to do it. You do it because one part of your team is an absolute disaster, right? The pitching side, which masks the very, very real progress that the Royals made on the hitting side, not just in terms of actually improving their offensive performance, but doing it with an absolutely historic crop of young talent. And I have some data that I'm going to share as we get into the show. Um, but I kind of wanted to pivot this around the fulcrum that is the Drew Waters experience. And
Okay.
this week, I mean, I think he's homered 3 times in his last 4 games here against the Indians.
A
He
big
was
one
what?
tonight, an extra
Yep,
inning.
3 run. We'd already planned this out, and then he capped our week with a game-winning home run in the 10th inning.
He likes to make us look smart. That's the key.
Yes, that will always endear me to you if you're a player and you make us look good, because God knows that's difficult. And the fact that his last two have been from the right side. His first 3 home runs were left-handed. He homered for the first time, I think yesterday, from the right side, and then today's game-winning home run in the 10th. A switch hitter who hits bombs from both sides. That's a rare commodity. That it's hard to look at a guy who does that, plays outfield, and not get some Carlos Beltran vibes. He's not Carlos Beltran, but he looks like a hell of a player for a guy that was just part of a trade for the 35th overall pick in the draft. What, not even 3 months ago? It maybe 3 months ago. Um, yeah. So what we're seeing from Drew Waters, today he also reached 100 plate appearances in the major leagues, which um, will be important when we get into some of the stats. But I could not be more impressed with the guy after 100 plate appearances in the majors. 5 home runs again already. I think his career high in home runs coming into the season in the minor leagues was 11, and for him to do 5 in a month in the major leagues is just remarkable, and is a testament to the fact that, yes, the Royals are developing hitters, and 95 losses or no, the amount of young hitting we've got here is has to warm your heart.
It does, and I think that's one of the things that is what you take away from the season, right? That's the biggest positive you can find is that there are a lot of position players to put in. All of them need to get better, and I mean all of them
Mhm.
need to get better. But that's where you can be excited as a fan is with their youth. There's a reason to believe that they all can get better. Will they all? No. Some will probably even regress as the book gets written on maybe where the holes are in their swings. And but the quantity of players, it also gives you hope that there will be other teams that look at it and go, okay, this is a good group, and you can make the trades for the players for the holes that you have in the organization. That's where all these hitters coming into me is the most exciting part of it is there's depth. So if one guy doesn't work, we're going to get to our prospects. There's outfield help on the way. If somebody doesn't work, if Olivares doesn't work out, there's another guy. If they all work out, there's some depth. And hopefully now with a new guy at the top, they'll be more transactional and trade depth for weakness, right? That's what this is all about.
Yeah, no, absolutely. It's what makes this crop of young hitters historic is not the quality per se. There's nobody's going to win Rookie of the Year off this team. It's the quantity. It's the sheer number of guys who have shown at least some promise in their first season in the major leagues. Almost all of them are under the age of 25, and that's the best way to build a lineup is just to find 5 or 6 or 7 young players and knowing that 2 or 3 of them are going to burn out, 2 or 3 of them are going to be disappointments, but that still leaves you 3 or 4 guys who are going to be core everyday hitters in the lineup potentially for the next 5 years or more.
Yeah, and
Um,
go ahead. I'm sorry.
no, no, finish your point because I do want to I want to start sharing some statistics and some comparisons to some teams from previous
Well,
generations.
on Drew Waters, you said he's not Carlos Beltran. You don't want to put that kind of label on him. Although he was drafted in a similar position, Carlos Beltran was a second round draft
Mhm.
pick. He hasn't come up quite as fast as Carlos Beltran did, but could he be Devin White? Can he be some of the guys that have at least been high caliber players on championship teams?
Yeah, absolutely. I think he doesn't have the speed necessarily of those guys, although he's not a slow guy. But I don't. When I think of his the comparison between him and Beltran or Devon White, it would be the speed where I don't think it fits. But could he be? I don't know. I saw a comparison to Colby Rasmus online, which that doesn't sound like a great compliment, but was actually a really good player for a few years. Um, could he be? Could he lean into the power a little bit more and be a Jim Edmonds type? Yeah, I think that's a possibility. Actually, I think when we get to the prospects, Gavin Cross, I think the high end upside of Gavin Cross might be more of a Jim Edmonds type, a little less speed, a little more power. But when you're an outfielder who's showing power and speed and plate discipline, there's a lot of different ways you can go. I mean, the issue with him is his strikeout rate. It's high. It's not as high as Nick Prado's was when which forced Nick back down to the minor leagues, but it's close to one out of three. But if he can bring that down even a little bit, I think he's shown enough of a skill set with all the other things he does. The defense looks good. The arm looks good. That I think he could be a three to four win player in the major leagues, if not an all-star, perennial all-star, a guy who's one level below that, a guy who absolutely can start for a playoff team and be an asset.
All right, let's get to the numbers, right? You've been grinding this. You've been I haven't even seen them.
No,
So you're
no,
very
no.
excited.
These are good numbers. I like
These
these
are
numbers.
fresh numbers, right? Fresh out of the oven.
I've had them for. I've
Um,
been sitting on them for a couple of days, and it tells you. You should be honored, Soren. I
okay.
did not share them on Twitter. I'm like, these are being saved for Kaufman Corner
Okay.
because they are. You know, I will be the first to admit that I can be guilty of hyperbole and talk about Royal player X doing, something no one's ever done before, and it turns out actually it's been done a few times, or uh, exaggerating, the rarity of certain feats. Um, but I got receipts this time. All right. So there's a couple of different ways we can look at this. So I simply ran a search. I'll start with this one. Every team in American League or National League history. Okay. How many rookies did they have that had two things, just two things: 90 or more plate appearances, and an OPS, adjusted OPS plus of 90 or more. So 90 plate appearances. Some of these guys are still rookies next year. Nathan Eaton, Drew Waters will still be rookies next year. So they haven't played that much, but 90 plate appearances, that's almost a month's worth of playing time. And a 90 OPS plus means you're at least decent.
Right.
Close, average or close to it. Okay.
Close to average,
In
right?
all of Major League history. Okay. The Royals, I should point out, have 7 such players.
Okay.
Okay. Let me go ahead and name them for you. One of them has already been traded, Emmanuel Rivera, but he counts for purposes of this list. The other 6, Nathan Eaton, Michael Massey, MJ Melendez, Vinny Pasquantino, Drew Waters, and Bobby Witt. Keep in mind, Nick Prado's not even on that list. Okay. But we're talking about those guys. All 6 of those guys are in the Royals lineup when they're not futzing around with Hunter Dozier and Ryan O'Hearn. Okay. So, I mean, 2/3 of your lineup are rookies. Okay. So they have 7 players on the Royals this year who are rookies who played a decent amount and played decently well. All right. Only 4 other teams in Major League history have had even 6. Only one has had 7. There's one other team in the history of the league that had 7 rookies like the Royals do, that all played a decent amount and all played decently well. Do you want to take a guess, wild guess as to who that team was?
Well, generally, like when I play this game with Curtis Siebold, who works with me and, on my radio show, it generally is either the answer in a situation like this would either be the Royals themselves. You have to go back to some other team that they had, or it would be something that it was great, right? Some championship caliber.
Let me. I'm going to give you one hint. I'm going to warn you though. I gave Joe Sheehan this very hint, and he nailed it on his first try. So no pressure. No pressure. Right. Okay. The hint is it is a team from the 1980s. Okay. I'll add in. It's not the Royals. Okay. It's a team from the 1980s, and as I put it to him, it's a team where we rarely talk about this team, but when I tell you who it is, you will say, "Oh yeah, that makes complete sense." Now, Joe and I have gone on the record for a long time as the 1980s baseball was the best baseball, just like the 1980s were the best decade. We still live in the past, so yes. I don't expect you necessarily to get it.
That was your childhood. That was my childhood as well. So 80s. So I'm thinking, we had the A's that were rocking and rolling at the end.
The specific rookie crop. That's a team that it wasn't even a team that was very good, but got a lot of hype. Even in that time, people realized, wow, this is a lot of rookies, a lot of young players.
Wow, wasn't Phil Garner had a group that he put in, but I think that was more the 90s Brewers.
Right.
Just a lot. Wow, that's a lot of rookies. Man, I'm drawing a blank. The White Sox, maybe? Did they jam a group in there once? I don't know. I'm out. I tip my cap to Joe Sheehan.
No shame there. Nobody in our comments has gotten it either. It's the 1982 Minnesota Twins. And before you say the 1982 Minnesota Twins,
because that's what I was going to say, by the way.
Let me review who those 7 people were, okay, on that team and the significance. Now, one of them was Randy Johnson. And before you say Randy Johnson, not that Randy Johnson. A Randy Johnson I'd never even heard of, who literally never played again after that season, which is why he's not Randy Johnson. But the other 6, Tom Brunansky,
okay,
Randy Bush, Gary Gaetti, Kent Herbeck, Tim Laudner, and then this one I think is the last one is actually kind of my favorite, Jim Eisenreich.
Yeah.
Now, for those of you who are under the age of 40, and that some of these names may not necessarily ring a bell, Tom Brunansky played 14 years in the majors, had 22 WAR in his career. Gary Gaetti, 20 years in the major leagues.
One of the handful of guys that had 30 home runs in the Royals.
Including 3 with the Royals, and would have probably broken Steve Alboni's home run record, except it was 1995, that was the season slightly shortened coming off the strike. They were 18
Right.
games missing. He had 35 home runs, 42 WAR in his career. Kent Herbeck, 14 seasons, 39 WAR.
And Herbeck, Gaetti, and Bernansky were at the heart, along with Kirby Puckett, of the Twins.
Well, here's the thing.
Championship team in
Except
87.
for Eisenreich and Rany Johnson, the other 5 guys, including Randy Bush and Tim Laudner, who was kind of a backup catcher but played 9 years,
Right.
all with the Twins. Randy Bush actually played 12 years in the majors, all with the Twins. Bush, Laudner, Herbeck played their entire career with the Twins. So, and those 5 guys, Bernansky, Bush, Gaetti, Herbeck, and Laudner, were all there when the Twins won the World Series 5 years later in 1987. Bush and Herbeck were still there when they won the second World Series in 1991. And keep in mind, that team, that 1982 Minnesota Twins team, with all these promising young players, they lost 102 games. They were a terrible team, but they had so much young hitting talent that, they quickly got better. They got to 500 within 2 years, and they kind of deked around 500 until 1987, when they won only 85 games, but then became the worst team to that point to ever win a World Series. And then they were a good team for the next 5 years and won another World Series. They, along the way, they picked up, like you mentioned, Kirby Puckett. I think there was one other. Greg Gagne was another guy that they added to that core. But the point is, they had a core in place. And of course, Jim Eisenreich, for those of you who aren't aware, Jim Eisenreich he came up late in that season and then barely played at all the next 2 years, because it turns out he had Tourette's syndrome, which made it difficult for him to play. For those who are not aware, it's a condition where players or people will have, it could be facial tics, it could be an urge to say things out loud that are inappropriate. It led to some embarrassing and very difficult situations for him on a playing field, and he actually had to leave the game for a couple of years.
Mm-hmm.
And while he was away from the game, I believe he found treatments that were more effective for him in helping to control that condition. And the Royals picked him up. And in 1987, he returned to pro ball. He was 28 years old, had not played professionally in 3 years. Went to Omaha, or no, actually to Double-A, but went to Double-A and had just one of the most ridiculous 70 games you'll ever see. He hit 382. He had 57 extra base hits in 70 games, which is like that's a pace Babe Ruth would be jealous of. Made it back to the major leagues and struggled for a couple of years, but 1989, which was the year I kind of really fell in love with the Royals. That was his breakout year. He was excellent. He had 293 that year for the Royals, a 122 OPS plus, and was basically maybe the game's best fourth outfielder for like 8 years. In 1996 with the Phillies, he had 361 and like 400 at bats. And so he remains one of my favorite Royals from my youth. He came along at the right time for me, and that's like the 5th guy on this list. So that Twins roster. That's the only team in Major League history comparable to the Royals by this statistic.
And looking at that 82 team, the 5 most common starting pitchers: Bobby Castillo, Brad Havens, Albert Williams, Jack O'Connor, and Frank Viola. Right, Frank Viola would go on to be a Cy Young winner.
That's their. Maybe we could hope so for Brady Sinker to have that kind of success. Yes, so
right, and he would anchor the rotation. That would then be when they won the championship in '87. Burt Blyleven, Les Straker, Mike Smithson, Joe Niekro, and then of course Frank Viola. So a couple of veterans brought in to polish off the staff with that hitting talent.
It wasn't like they developed a lot of young pitching to go with that. They brought in Joe Niekro and Burt Blyleven, who were like late 30s, early 40s.
And then the what's funny is that I think the '91 team though they had Scott Erickson, Brad Radke.
Yes.
I'm looking here. I'm opening it up. That year they had Jack Morris, Kevin Tappan. He was there. Scott Erickson. Alan Anderson. I guess Brad Radke wasn't there yet.
No, Radke came a few, I think 93 or 94. So,
okay.
I mean, they had a decade. Eventually, they're going to hit on some pitching, right? But the point is,
I don't know. We've said that for a long time in Kansas City, and it really hasn't happened. So I wouldn't just say eventually.
Well, but that's the thing. They won in '87 with the only aside from Frank Viola, no other core part of that rotation who was homegrown. So yeah, I mean, it's just one sample size, but it is a reminder of just how rare what the Royals have done this year is, and the only team comparable had went from even lower in the standings that the Royals are to a World Championship in 5 years. So that's a good one. That now I can play with this stat in a lot of different ways. If you because remember of what I used was rookies, but what I think actually makes the Royals more unusual is that they're not just rookies. These are all guys, with the exception of Manuel Rivera, who's already been traded anyway. All the other 6 guys on that list were all debuted this season. Like those Twins, a lot of those guys came up late in '81 and they played a little bit, and then and then were on the roster to start the season. With the Royals, they all debuted this year. Aside from Bobby Witt, they were all in the minor leagues to start the season. So you had 6 guys with the same requirements: 90 plate appearances, 90 OPS plus, 6 Royals who debuted this season, and only one other team has had even 5. They also had 6, but basically no other major American or National League team since 1900, we'll say the modern era, has had more than 4 players. The Royals had 6. The only other team that had 6, the 1958 San Francisco Giants. And that was a team. When I start mentioning the names, you'll see. I mean, that in some ways, this group might even be more impressive in terms of what they ended up doing. Because the first guy, Felipe Alou, 17 years in the majors, 42 WAR. Jim Davenport, 13 years in the majors, 18 WAR. Orlando Cepeda in the Hall of Fame, 17 years, 50 WAR. Willie Kirkland, who was a force for the first 4 years of his career. I think he was an older rookie. And he played, 10 years in the major leagues, I believe. And 9 seasons, had 10 WAR. And then Leon Wagner and a backup catcher named Bob Schmidt. So 3 of those guys were like excellent players for over a decade. One's in the Hall of Fame. The Giants, it was actually their first year in San Francisco, and it was the first of 14 consecutive winning seasons for that team. Now, of course, they had Willie Mays, they had Willie McCovey. Like there was a lot of talent there, but that was the guys that I mentioned were a huge part of their continued success for the next 10 years or so. But again, the Giants had 6. No other teams had 5. So the Royals have like 2 more players than basically every other team in the history of baseball. And so this is a rare crop of players. It doesn't guarantee they're going to be successful.
Right.
None of these, with the exception of Pasquantino, none of these guys have an OPS plus above 110. So they're all kind of like average. And so there is a bet here on their youth, in the case of guys like Witt and Melendez, like their pedigree, that they are going to get better. They need to get better. And, the other thing is that this group defensively, at least what the defensive metrics say, the defense isn't there. I mean, Bobby Witt is the second worst defensive player by defensive runs saved this year. He's like -21. Do you know who the worst defensive player is?
I'm sure he's on this club.
It's MJ Melendez. The only reason Bobby Witt is MJ Melendez is such a bad pitch framer behind the plate. I think he's cost the Royals 18 runs in terms of his catching, and he's only played like 50 games behind the plate. I mean, that's just I'm not sure that's salvageable. I mean, until we get automated balls and strikes, I just don't know that you can play MJ Melendez behind the plate and expect to contend. So there's work to be done here, but the bats are, it's rare.
It's rare, and here's the question though. I do like the numbers, and I do like that okay, where do they comp to? They comp to a team, Giants, who had talent, the Twins, who had talent. But the sample size, we can admit, is tiny, right? And I think that you also run the risk that what has occurred here is not necessarily talent that's just forced its way onto the field. It is a result of a regime or an individual that was looking for success this year, or at least, an improvement, a 500-like record. And when it became very clear that it wasn't going to happen, said, well, what's the only way to buy another year? I don't think this is how Dayton Moore thinks. I don't think he thought, how do I save my job? Because I believe the reports that Dayton Moore is surprised that he's not still running the operation for the Royals right now. I don't think he saw it coming. Some of us did. We talked about it. There's a number of different reasons as to why. We've already discussed that before on previous episodes of the Kaufman Corner, so you can check back. But the question is, because it's such a small sample size, are these players jammed to the big leagues because one, just failure of other decisions left the door wide open and somebody has to play? Are they on this club because it was, listen, if you jam it all through, it's like you draft a quarterback because year one, nobody expects them to be good. And so you can be bad and you've got an excuse. If they're good and you win, great. But then you get year two where you've got, well, now we're developing him, right? Like that's the way you sustain your regime by the future always being, or by the success always being right around the corner, right? Like you ask every high school football coach in America that's not winning, loves his sophomores, loves his juniors. Success is right around the corner. That's what's coming. And so that's the question here, right? Are the numbers good enough to buy in? And you mentioned the part about, Bobby Witt Jr.'s defense. And I think this is what has to change. I wonder if JJ Picollo was beating a drum for moving positions on guys, because we've said it throughout the course of the year. You can't get to where all these guys are up and they don't, and we still don't know where any of them play. Like, who do you know this is where this guy will play, and he's going to play for 6 years, and he's going to play at a level that he's worthy of being in a contending lineup? Name the guy that you know where he plays, and you're confident for 6 years he will hit well enough to be in a contending lineup. Who is it?
I mean, the easy I guess it depends on, would you say, if I say Vinny Pasquantino will play and he will play either first base or DH, is that close enough or no?
Yeah,
Because,
I'll give you the first base
okay,
DH combo because
okay.
so often
I
that's what
think
guys
Vinny
play.
Pasquantino
Okay,
is that guy, and
agreed.
that's why we've talked about he's the guy I would go after for maybe a long-term contract. Strangely enough, I almost, if positional certainty matters, I almost wonder if I put Michael Massey next, if only because I know where he's going to play. I don't know with 100% certainty that he will hit enough to keep, to be an everyday guy. But if he does, he's a second baseman.
Okay,
He doesn't have the ability to move to a different position, and he actually has the defensive chops to be a pretty good defensive second baseman. His defensive numbers do not suck, unlike some of his teammates.
right.
So Michael Massey's one of these like sort of underrated guys. You look at guys who are come up and they're not the most heralded prospect on their team, but because they didn't have the crazy hitting numbers in the minor leagues, but they do a little bit of everything, right? He plays a more important position and he hits for a decent average and he has a little bit of pop and he's got good defensive ability, and you add it all up and suddenly that's a 4-win guy, and he actually, might end up being more valuable than some of an MJ Melendez, who was a top 50 prospect and, led the minor leagues in home runs last year. I actually, I'm like, at this point, I'm probably higher on Michael Massey than MJ Melendez, simply because I know where Michael Massey's going to play. And with MJ Melendez, I have no idea defensively what you do with a guy like that.
Yeah, and that's the issue, and that's the issue that should have been solved before now. That's part of the reason why there's a new man in charge in JJ Picollo, is because it can't come, the puzzle can't be drawn at the big league level, and that's what it feels like is going on here for this team, because they don't. We still don't know where it all fits together, and I don't think anyone. I don't think Mike Matheny knows. I think JJ Picolo's got an idea of how he'd like it to fit together, right? But I don't think just the return of Adalberto Mondesi makes it all suddenly click. I'm optimistic that Massey will hit enough to warrant being what is a modern second baseman. But you're right. If he's a glove guy, then you got to have a bat at short, right? You can't be two glove guys up the middle anymore. You've got to find offense, and that's the question. Now, again, quantity of guys. I think we know it's not going to be Nicky Lopez. I think that ship has sailed on him hitting well enough, but he can be a utility guy for the club. The question is, will Bobby Witt Jr. take the third base? Because that's the problem, is if he's a defensive liability and he is going to get on base at a 297 clip, you really got a problem there.
Yeah, I mean, the issue with Witt, there's two I'll call them deficiencies, because the rest of the profile is, of course, not just elite, but like potentially historic. We saw today he stole his 30th base, and the Royals put out the list of the last five players 22 and under to have 20 home runs and 30 steals in a season. Right, power and speed, athleticism and production all in one. And the last five guys were, I think, Ronald Acuna, Mike Trout, who did it twice, because of course he did. Um, Alex Rodriguez, and Barry Bonds. I mean, we're talking about the elite of the elite. The problem is, if you actually go in and look at those players, there's one area where they have Bobby Witt beat soundly, and that's the number of walks that they drew, and that in those same seasons. A-Rod actually only drew like 45 walks, although he also hit like 310, and it was like his third full season in the majors. But like Acuna drew, I want to say 70 or so. Mike Trout drew 65 one season, 110 the other season. Even, and Barry Bonds was not the walking machine he would become, but he walked like 55 or 60 times. Bobby Witt has 30 walks. And in all of Major League history, I went back and looked. There are only 8 guys have ever done this ever at this age to have this level of power and speed. Vada Pinson, Cesar Cedeno, I believe Willie Davis, all of them have had more than 40 walks in their season. There's really never been somebody, if you want to be truly historic about Bobby Witt, you can say nobody's ever had this much power, this much speed, and this poor of plate discipline at this age. We're kind of in uncharted territory. I feel a lot more optimistic that he will learn the strike zone than I would have had he been in this organization 4 years ago. Because frankly, he's kind of an anomaly in this rookie crop, because Vinny Pasquantino has more walks in half a season than Bobby Witt does. MJ Melendez is, has a terrific walk rate. He has, I think, the lowest walk rate of all of these guys. Drew Waters has walked, I think, 11 times already or something like that in the majors. So I'm hopeful that Bobby Witt will learn that. But you throw in his defensive question mark where he's going to play and his walk rate. And I'm still not 100% sure he's going to be a star. I think he can be. I'm optimistic he will be, but those are the two things he needs to work
on. And I like this one from Matt. Remember, they all stopped running, so unless Bobby Witt Jr. is going to start hitting 40 bombs,
which he might,
which he might.
Yeah,
I mean,
maybe not right away, but in 4 or 5 years, by the time he loses his speed. Yeah, sure.
And George Brett wasn't a great defensive player when he first came up, and he worked himself into ultimately winning a Gold Glove in 1985. Mm-hmm. I think those are all things. I think the athleticism of Bobby Witt Jr. says that if he really wants to be truly great in the field, he can do it. My question is, should he have been playing center field? I mean,
should he still play center field? I mean, today I'm watching the game today, and Zach Greinke in his final inning, possibly as a Royal, got a ground ball with the tying run on third and 2 outs, a ground ball to Bobby Witt's left. Bobby managed to snare it. It bounced out of his glove. It was an error, and tying run scored. The Royals ended up winning, but Greinke didn't get the win. It was a play he should have made. It wasn't a matter of, he didn't get to the ball or he had a late break. It's just he's not sure-handed. Hopefully that's something that he can fix. But the more I watch him, the more I'm like, man, that speed in the outfield, I almost have more confidence at this point he could be an elite defensive center fielder than that he'll ever be an elite defensive shortstop.
I agree. I mean, to me, I don't think you're frying panning the ball all over the place and going on to be one of the greats. He can get better. Everybody can. But I like this from Nick. Alex Gordon wasn't a stud defensively. He figured it out. Yes.
Yeah. In the outfield. Exactly. That's definitely an argument in the favor of moving Bobby Witt.
And listen, guys are always more valuable in the dirt. And what is, I think, a little bit scary is, do they keep bad players in the dirt? Do they keep bats that can't really hit in the dirt at second? We'll see if Massey what he's going to be. Do they keep a guy who can't really field in the dirt at third and Bobby Witt Jr.? Because now they've got a wave of outfielders coming. Right?
That's the irony. I almost feel more committed to him in the infield today than I did when we were talking back in June, because since June,
him being
Bobby Witt, we were having this conversation back then, and I was thinking maybe outfield is a destination. Now we have a full season of bad defensive numbers, and yet I'm still like, let's keep him at third base because they added Drew Waters, which who's basically needs to start every day in the major leagues now. Gavin Cross might arrive within ideally within a season, but certainly within two if things go according to plan. So yeah, the Royals. JJ Picollo has a challenge. It's a good challenge to have, which is he's got talent and he doesn't know where to put it. They've got to figure that out. But it is one of the reasons why I am optimistic that the Royals could be one of those surprise teams that make a huge jump forward in the span of a single season. Because if they can just get the defensive alignment of the players they already have, they could make a huge defensive upgrade, which will manifest as a huge pitching upgrade that can happen almost overnight. And to me, the iconic example of this are the 2008 Tampa Bay Rays, which up until that point, the Rays had just been like the laughing stock of the American League. I mean, they were a worse run organization than the Royals since they entered the league in 1998. I mean, they lost 90 games pretty much every year. And I think they lost 96 games in 2007. And the following year, they were the American League champions. And what they did was just a massive defensive upgrade everywhere. They took B.J. Upton, if you remember B.J. Upton, who kind of, not a Bobby Witt exact analog, but like was the
pretty damn close
number 2 pick in the draft out of high school. Like that's actually, he didn't have quite the power. I think in his rookie year he hit like 9 homers maybe, but stole like 40 bases. Yeah, he's very close to Bobby Witt, but was a terrible defensive second baseman. And we didn't really have the defensive numbers then that we do now. And one of the things that had happened was that a new front office in Tampa Bay, basically the progenitor of the Tampa Bay Rays that you know today, had taken over and were responsible for all these changes. No, I take it back. He hit 24 home runs. It was actually the year they moved him that he only hit 9. So he had hit 24 home runs and stolen 22 bases the year before in 2007 as a 22-year-old. Bobby, this is very, very similar to Bobby Witt. He hit 300, so he actually had a better season. But his defense at second base was poor. They moved him to center field the following year. They brought in a player from Japan, I think Iwakuma maybe, to be their second baseman, and then moved B.J. Upton, who was a bad defensive, or Iwamura, sorry. They moved a bad defensive second baseman to center field, where he became an excellent defensive center fielder. And then they brought in a new second baseman who was above average. So they were able to upgrade their defense significantly at 2 positions. They did that. They traded away Delman Young, if you recall, was the number 1 pick in the draft for pitching. Delman Young could hit, but couldn't play defense to save his life. Is there an MJ Melendez comparison there? If you trade MJ Melendez for pitching, and then not only do you get pitching, but then you put a good defensive outfielder out there, there are ways to do that. But in overnight, they went from winning 66 games to winning 97 games in one season.
Yeah.
So there is, the point is, there is a pathway when you have this much hitting talent, but you don't know where to put it on the field. There is a pathway that involves overnight improvement.
Is Drew Waters a championship center fielder?
Maybe. I'm certainly not. I would still say like less than 50-50 when you say championship caliber, but could he be a starting center fielder starting next year? I think yes. I think he could be. I think he could be an elite average guy.
If you're not going to be good in center, then you better be good with the bat, and then you can have guys that come in late for you when you have a lead and do those kind of things. But what you can't be is with the bat and with the glove, right? And I think Matt said it. He's like, Oliveira strikes me as a 4th outfielder. Isbell, 4th outfielder. And I'm with him on both those guys. Although Oliveira has swung the bat better, there's reason to at least be optimistic. But what he's done to this point is age. But you mentioned guys getting better as far as strike zone recognition. Not at this age. Not at 22. I'm not buying on that. And Jeff Montgomery said it. You are what the back of your baseball card says you are. We saw that with Michael A. Taylor. Like early on, remember how excited you were about his on base? Where's it gone?
Yes,
He's reverted back to what that
reverted.
says in the
But
back.
he's also 31 years old. Like, yes,
Right.
that's why it's unusual. But could Bobby Witt at age 22 learn the strike zone? Yes, I can find quite a few examples of guys at that age learning the strike zone.
Does Bobby Witt have a year where it all comes together and he bats 315 with a 325, 335 on base? Yes, there's probably something. There's a year in there like that. But is he going to become a 365 on base guy? No.
You know what? I will disagree with that. I think he can. I mean, look, what's he hitting? 260, 255, roughly. I think, if that 255, I think can get up to 280, 290. But I think if it's something that's a point of
A lot of
emphasis,
swing and miss for a
the
guy
swing and
that's
miss isn't as bad as I feared. 132 strikeouts coming into today.
if
132
if
strikeouts
you're
for a
walking
power
with
hitter.
it, Ranny.
Yes, and I agree. That's what I'm saying. But the walks are the issue. But I'm saying a player this young who has shown the other skills can go from 30 walks a season to 60 walks. I don't think he's going to be a 150 walk. I know, but 60 walks a season, absolutely, he could if the Royals emphasize it. I'm actually going to look up Carlos Beltran, who we've brought up a lot for obvious reasons. Was a little more patient as a rookie. 46 walks as a rookie, 52 in his second full season. But by the time he got to the Mets, he had 95 walks in 2006 when he was 29 years old, in part because when the power plays, pitchers are going to start nibbling and they're not going to challenge you. So if you are willing to take what they give you, that's going to inevitably mean you're going to draw more walks. So it starts with having pop. Like Nicky Lopez is never going to be a 100 walk guy because nobody's afraid of throwing him strikes. But Bobby Witt, if the power continues to develop and becomes a 30 home run a year guy, pitchers are going to try and not throw him in the strike zone. And if he learns to lay off the pitches in the dirt, he could walk 50 or 60 times this season.
Diet
And if he
Carlos
does that,
Beltran.
sorry,
Diet Carlos Beltran. I'll listen to.
Okay. I mean, that's depending on how intense the diet that is, that still could be a hell of a player.
Yeah.
Diet Hall of Famer is still a really good player.
Yeah, and Beltran is a borderline Hall of Famer. So, I'm with that. Let's get to our prospect list, right? Our dozen players. Do you want to go bottom to top or top?
Bottom to top. I think it'll be more fun. So we're going to start 12 and go up.
See, because for me, the very top is pretty known, right? Depending upon how crafty you want to get. And the bottom could be fun. My bottom's fun, but let's go bottom.
Okay. If you want, then let's start at the top and we'll.
No. We can do it either way. I'm good either way.
Well, I'm actually curious now. Who is your number one?
Gavin Cross.
Okay. I went back and forth on this, and there may be some recency bias here. I'm sure there is, but I actually ended up putting Drew Waters at 1.
Okay.
And I thought about it. I'm like, is it really safe because we're talking about 100 plate appearances now in the major leagues, right? 100 very impressive plate appearances. I mean, he's up to 261, 350, 523. That's impressive, but still 102 plate appearances, I think, in the major league, something like that. But then I looked at it. I'm like, you know what? Gavin Cross has like 109 plate appearances as a professional. Like if we're not going to hold the small sample size against Gavin Cross, can I really hold it against Drew Waters? He looks really good, but even in his sample size, he's got a 25% strikeout rate in A-ball this year. So given that Drew Waters' strikeout rate, which is I think just a hair under, it's like 32% in the major leagues, maybe isn't that much worse. He's only about 2 years older than Gavin Cross. 2 years and 2 months older. So will Gavin Cross be doing what Drew Waters is doing in 2 years and 2 months? Hopefully, but there's risk between A-ball and the majors. This is a bit of a plant my flag, but I'm going to put Waters 1 and Gavin Cross 2.
Okay, I've got Drew Waters 2.
Okay,
so I'm right there. I'll take Cross with the higher pedigree. Waters.
I mean, that's ultimately the reason, right? I mean, yeah. I'd be thrilled if he turns out to be the better prospect. It means the Royals drafted well, with that 10th pick, and we're both hoping for that.
Yeah, but to me, listen, and this is true. Every prospect list, whoever they just took, is almost always at the top of it because they haven't had a chance to fail. They're usually talented enough that they're going to outclass whatever the starting level is, and the answers come later. And so, to me, that's the deal. Now, if you want to, we can fall down to the bottom and make our way back up, or do you want to just keep?
No, go ahead. Who do you have at number 3?
Number 3, I've got Tyler Gentry.
Okay, So we agree there. So yeah, it's probably better we go this way because we're gonna probably disagree more as
Okay.
we go. Yes, for those who don't know, I mean Tyler Gentry, third round pick 2 years ago in the pandemic draft.
Alabama.
Um, and this year, finally, it was last year, missed part of the year with like knee tendonitis, but he hit 336 in A ball, then went to double A and hit 321 and he's a power hitting right fielder. He had 21 home runs on the year, 326, 422, 542. I mean, just from a pure offensive performance, really nobody in the farm system performed like him this year. A 965 OPS. And his strikeout rate is very reasonable. It's like 21, 22%. He's 23 years old. Again, the pandemic, we can't hold that against him too much because of the pandemic. And he's the kind of guy where if he has a hot spring training, like there could be like rumblings that he might break camp with the team. Like he could be ready, if not on opening day, very shortly thereafter next year.
Yeah, and I think you got to like the all around skill set, and so to me, that's pretty easy. Do you agree that after this, it gets now we're probably going to diverge?
We probably are, yes, because I mean those are the clearly the three. What's interesting though is think about 1, 2, 3. All three of those guys are outfielders. And that's what we're talking about. Suddenly, we're not. We were bemoaning the fact that we didn't really have any outfield depth in this organization when we started this podcast, and now it's like, well, they've got a starting outfield out of the top 3 prospects. That's interesting.
Cross and Gentry should come quick.
I think so. I mean, Gentry is close already, whereas Gavin is far. But if he's as good as we think he is, he could move very quickly.
So, if he warrants, there needs to be, they need to hit with like a Springer caliber outfielder on him. They have to have quality.
I mean,
come there.
I would hope that he would start next season in Double A. Like he'll skip. He's if he starts in high A ball, it's not a red flag, but it'll be a little bit disappointing. If they've sent it to Double A next year, then you know that they're impressed and that that he's on the fast track. And if you're starting Double A, you're two really hot months away from being in the in the major leagues. If the team is trying to win and they think he's their best option.
Yeah, I will say, is any of them? I mean, like Waters might be able to play center, but it sounds like you like him at center as a bat first center fielder.
I think
so that to me is still the issue.
Right. I was going to say all 3 of these guys. I mean, Gavin, all 3 of them. Gentry's really a right fielder. I wouldn't even call him a center fielder, but the other 2 are like in a perfect world, they would be right fielders and they would be good right field. Like defensively, they are capable of being very good right fielders. They're a little stretched in center. And that could mean that they're fine now and in 5 years they'll need to move, or it could be that they're not really capable of doing it. Like it would be nice if you had one guy who was an elite defensive center fielder. It does make me wonder if the Royals, having Michael, are going to keep Michael A. Taylor around as sort of, because the one thing you could say about Michael A. Taylor, maybe his walks were a fluke, but his defense is just consistently, elite. It really is. I mean, he's like a plus 20 defender practically this year now. I mean, it's his WAR is like terrific. He's plus 19, 2 years in a row, plus 19 defender, 3.3 WAR, which makes him, I think, the Royals, the most valuable player on the team except for Brady Singer. So I think, especially if you're thinking of having some center fielders who are bat first guys, having a guy like Michael A. Taylor around to play defense, the Royals may opt for that for next, to start next season rather than trade him this winter.
Yeah, and Tyler Gentry, by the way, the question was asked in the chat room. If you're catching us, by the way, later on via the podcast, you can be part of the conversation. Normally on Sunday nights at 10. Coming to you tonight on a Monday night because we had a Chiefs Sunday night game. So, by the way, hit the likes, the loves, the subscribes. Don't cost you nothing, but it helps us immensely. So if you can go ahead and smash those buttons, it would be much appreciated by us. But, Gentry going to be 24. By the time next season gets going. February birthday is 23.
He's 33 days younger than Drew Waters, I guess is the point, which, sounds old, but Drew Waters is not old necessarily.
Oh.
He's age appropriate. And again, I think Tyler Gentry could be ready for the major leagues to start next season or not that long after, depending on how aggressive the Royals want to be with him.
Okay, so now let's go to number 4.
Okay, so my number 4 is Michael Garcia.
Okay. Interesting. All right.
Okay. So, and my argument here is, and I've sort of made this argument before on this podcast, which is he might actually be the Royals' best shortstop going forward. Because if Bobby Witt is not capable of being a good defensive shortstop, I think Michael Garcia is. I think he's still young. He's 22. So I mean, even though he's made it to the major leagues, he's a full year younger than Tyler Gentry, a year younger than Drew Waters. He hit, he's shown plate discipline throughout his minor league career. He had 41 walks and 60 strikeouts in Double A this year, and then went to Triple A. His strikeout to walk ratio fell off a bit, but then his pop showed up, and he hit 7 home runs in 40 games after never hitting more than 4 in a season. So he hit 11 for the year, 285 batting, 359 on base, 427 slugging, 39 steals. And from the reports, a perfectly legitimate major league shortstop. But we'll need some numbers to know if he's like truly above average or just average. But at this point, I think he's probably better than Bobby Witt at the position. And he really strikes me as an Alcides Escobar with maybe a little bit more plate discipline, a little bit more power. I think he could be a starting shortstop in the majors. I think he's a really underrated prospect.
The fear is that he's just a little bit more than Nicky Lopez, though.
I think he's got more pop.
He's showing more right now.
Yeah, the last 3 months, even though his walk rate dropped, I actually more excited about him now than I was 3 months ago, because I think he's past that like minimum threshold that Nicky Lopez could never get over to consistently threaten pitchers enough that they can't just like pound the strike zone and eat the bat out of his hands.
So you said a little more power than Nicky Lopez. Is that what you said?
No, a little more power than Alcides Escobar.
Than Escobar. Okay. Yeah, because it needs to be a lot more.
Yeah. That's what I'm saying. Right. I think if you take Alcides Escobar and you just add 10% more offense, Alcides Escobar was capable of playing shortstop for a 2-time pennant winner. So that's not bad, but I think he could be even slightly better than that.
All right. Number 4 for me is Frank Mazzucato.
Okay. I have him number 6. So that's, and like you, I have him as the best pitching prospect in the system.
Yeah. I love the strikeouts. That to me is, he's showing power stuff. You're much more likely to learn to throw strikes than you are to not swing at balls as a hitter. And so I feel confident that, he's at least blowing guys away, cleaning up the guys he's putting on. And eventually when he doesn't put them on, I think the strikeouts stay and the control gets better. And so I like the power stuff. And there's, for all the reasons they took him where they took him, he's the guy out of those young pitchers to like.
To some degree, like I said, I have him 6, not quite as high, but that I think both of us are showing a vote of confidence in him certainly compared to where we were with him in April and May.
Yes.
And to me, some of having him ranked this high it is a vote of confidence in the fact that the Royals are going to do something with their pitching development, like that things are going to get better on some level.
Yes.
Because he, I think, has shown us the raw stuff was there. I mean, the concern when he was drafted was, I said the number one concern was simply he didn't throw that hard yet. Lefty was throwing around 90 to 92. But he was so young. He was 17 when he was drafted, and that his frame was considered so projectable that the assumption was he would pick up velocity. And I think he has. And this hasn't been an elite amount, but the other thing is he doesn't have to have elite velocity. His curveball's so good and deceptive enough that it makes his fastball play up. And we saw that. 89 strikeouts in 69 innings is nothing to sneeze at. So, yeah.
Yeah, and by the way, Michael Garcia, I have it 6, so we have our 4 and 6 flip flopped.
Fair enough. There's no massive disagreements there.
So let me go ahead and predict that you have the same number 5 that I do, and it's Caden Wallace.
Nope.
Oh wow.
Okay. I have Caden Wallace 8. I have number 5, and this one, this is one of the guys, but maybe the hardest guy for me to figure out where to put him, and that is Carter Jensen.
Okay, all right, he's on my list.
Okay, so Carter Jensen,
catcher, by the way, young catcher.
Yes. Think of really, there's a lot of comparisons here with like an MJ Melendez, left-handed hitting catcher with not a ton of power yet, although 11 home runs is in 113 games, nothing to sneeze at.
At just 18 years old too, right?
But he was 18. He turned 19 on July 3rd. He's technically his age 18 season, but 83 walks and 103 strikeouts. Like that level of plate discipline from an 18-year-old is almost unheard of. And the thing is, he was dramatically better in the second half. If you just like cut off from his birth date, for the time he turned 19 till the end of the season. He hit 286, 440 on base, 435 slugging, 49 walks in 50 games. That's an insane walk rate. If he can catch, if this guy were like an elite defensive catcher, I mean, I think he'd be the number one prospect in the system, because if you have a catcher who can get on base at a 40% clip, that's a star. I don't know if he can catch, and this is the MJ Melendez problem. If you have a catcher who can't catch, where does he play, and what value does he provide defensively? And Carter Jensen just turned 19. I don't think he's played anywhere except catcher on the field. He's DH'd like all minor leaguers do, but he hasn't played any other positions. I don't even know where the else would consider him. It's way too early to give up on him as a catcher. By the time he gets to the majors, there may be automated balls and strikes, something MJ Melendez can't benefit from. But there's a lot of risk here, but I think that the upside is just too high to ignore.
I have Caden Wallace, upside, has a position, third base, has shown hit skills already. So I put him at 5 because I got him ahead of Michael Garcia, because I don't know that Michael Garcia, number one, I mean, I can't imagine he still weighs 140, right? Which is his listed weight. But if he does,
I'm sure he doesn't.
if he does, I kind of have those questions. Like, I believe Michael Garcia is actually a shortstop defensively. Like, we know where he's going to play, but I'm not convinced that the bat will be there. And I probably ding him a little bit because I'm not sure that they'll have enough hit over on the second base part of the equation. So maybe I'm holding, organizational inefficiencies against him, and that's not fair. But Wallace, I feel like, I know where he's going to play. By all accounts, he is a legit third baseman, and so he goes there. Garcia, then I have at 6, and I have Carter Jensen at 7. And for me, it's like after Wallace, like there's a big question mark with everybody, right? Like Wallace might not end up hitting. He may top out and get to Double-A and be like, that's it. That's what the guy had. In Triple-A, he's a 220, and he just can't handle the bigger breaking balls and whatever happens. But I at least know what the path is. I'm not sure with Michael Garcia, but I did like what we saw from Garcia. And again, he's 6. I'm not throwing him off the list.
Yeah, these are all just shades of gray.
And Carter Jensen is 7 because of the plate discipline, right? I love that. And the potential for him to stick at catcher, right? Like that makes him number 7 for me. And you had who at 8? You had Caden Wallace at 8?
I had Caden Wallace at 8, right. And then the only reason I'm not low is really I need to see more. I mean, he's, played a month of, pro ball. And he wasn't as highly touted as Gavin Cross was. But I do think that he was, I don't want to say he slipped to the Royals, but he certainly wasn't an overdraft. So he's in my top 10. And he's also, keep in mind, he's also younger than Gavin Cross. He didn't turn 21 until a month after the draft. So
by the way, I do love these from Matt. The left side of my body weighs 140. Michael says one of my legs weighs 140. I know that's like, I shouldn't be so afraid of that, but that does scare me with Garcia.
Yeah, if he's still 140, I would be. Yeah, I would be very surprised. Yeah, so weights in among baseball players is mostly fiction. I think Prince Fielder was listed at like 195 until he was like 30 or something. Like, I don't think I would put too much stock in that. So at number 7, and another guy, I'm not entirely sure where to put him, but I've always liked him. And he struggled a little when he got to AAA, which dinged him, but not that much for me. And that's Nick Lofton.
Okay.
And this is the guy I kind of describe him as a Whit Merrifield kind of clone. That's the goal here. Supplemental first round pick in the pandemic draft 2 years ago. Hit very well in high A ball last year, hit well in Double-A this year, 270, 354, 422, and always made good contact. His strikeout rates was like 14%, which is excellent. Can play second base and play center field. And that's a guy, he can move around the field a lot. He even started at some shortstop and third base this year. But he was promoted to AAA late in the year. And in 38 games, he had 216. His strikeout rate almost doubled to like 25%. Slugged 360. So that gave me a little bit of concern. He's the same age as Tyler Gentry, 23 years old. He'll be 24 next year. Like what Merrifield took a couple, obviously in Merrifield's case, took 5 or 6 years to really develop. He didn't make it to the majors till he was 27. I don't think that'll be the case here. But Lofton, the skill set is such that even if he needs a year in AAA to sort of consolidate, I think that he could be a really useful guy, maybe an everyday guy, or at the very least, like a super utility guy who plays all over the field. And he has a much, I think he has a much safer, higher floor than most of the guys on this list, but not the ceiling.
Okay. Okay. And he's at 7.
He's at 7. Yeah. Do you have him on your list?
I do have him on my list. I have him at 10.
Okay.
Right.
So again,
So
we're really disagreeing that much.
I'm concerned he's hitting his head on the ceiling right now, and you're looking at more of just a pure utility player. But he's on my list. Yes, he's at number 10. So we're pretty similar here, right? And now we're ready for 8. Is that right for you?
So 8 for me is Caden Wallace. So who
Caden
was 8
Wallace.
for you?
So 8 has not been mentioned yet by me. 8 is Jonathan Bolin.
Ooh, okay.
So I put
Okay.
him down. Terrible year this year, numbers wise, coming back from surgery.
From Tommy John surgery, yes.
Tommy John surgery. I do have some fear that the good numbers he put up right before he had surgery was because, guys have that phenomenon where the velocity goes up 2 or 3 miles an hour
And
right
then they blow
before
out.
the elbow gives out. And was that what was ratcheting up his strikeout numbers? But he looked like he was really locking in and coming together. Big frame guy. So, kind of Clemens looking body type for the guy. So I'll take a splash on the upside, and I go Jonathan Bolin at 8. Did he make your list?
He did not. But
Okay.
that's not. But I'm not saying you're necessarily wrong. I mean, before he blew out his elbow, I mean, right before he might have been the best pitching prospect right in the system. And this is a guy, like you said, you mentioned the body type. He's huge, 6'6", 240 is what he's listed at.
Yeah.
But when he was drafted, I mean, he was a second round pick, the fifth of those guys. He was a guy who taken after Singer and Lynch and Kowar and Bubich. And he was a signability guy. Like he was a senior, I think, a senior sign, got a little less money so they could sign the other guys because he didn't have that great stuff. He was more of a command guy, even though he had the body of like a power pitcher. And what happened was that the stuff ticked up. And so then you still had this great command guy who actually had like major league stuff. And that was what was so exciting. And then he blew out his elbow. Tommy John surgery, not great, but it's, recoverable. But he came back. I'm a little worried, like, in 9 starts in Double-A this year, 39 innings, 51 hits, 17 walks, 30 strikeouts. Like the hits don't concern me so much, but the walks and strikeouts, he's definitely rusty. And I'm hoping that's all it is. He didn't even take the mound until like June or July in like rookie ball. But I'm just a little bit concerned. If he's healthy, if he's 100% next year, Bolin absolutely belongs in the top 10. I need to see a little bit more first.
And Eddie in the chat room said maybe a pen piece. That's absolutely what they were kind of talking about when they drafted him. They give everybody a chance to start, right? Mm-hmm. But with the idea that may be where he ends up. And my fear is that he humped up like he was thrown out of the pen and started overthrowing, and that's what blew the arm out. But yes, I mean, he's got the frame to be able to have power stuff. So I think there's upside there. So I'll always push the upside up on my list. So I've got him at 8. You've got Caden Wallace at 8. So now we're ready for 9.
So number 9, I have Ben Caderna.
Okay. I do too.
So no disagreement there. So Caderna, at the beginning of the year, I mean, he was out pitching Mazzucato, and we were like even saying, oh, well, at least Caderna's pitching well because Mazzucato's not. But as the season went along, Mazzucato's strikeouts got better, his walks came down. Caderna, his performance didn't necessarily get worse, but the strikeouts were still a little bit disappointing. And,
the strikeouts are disappointing in the walks. Actually, he's getting credit for not walking guys because he's compared to Shane Panzini and Frank Mazzucato.
He's compared to literally every other pitcher in the Royals organization.
Yes, and his walks are actually high. To me, Ben Caderna, I would take off this list if I didn't feel completely confident that there are going to be major changes to the pitching. And I'm expecting somebody to get in there, read a spin rate, find something, change where he is on the rubber, and for the stuff to tick up, because the numbers he's putting up right now just say he's more cerebral than the hitters he's facing. And when he has to beat somebody with stuff, he doesn't have it. But the fact that they gave him $3 million, basically just a couple of bucks less than they gave Mazzucato.
Right.
Now, I think also he's a local kid, so I think they are terrified of a Pujols happening under their nose. And so I think they probably overpaid him a little bit to make sure that they kept the local kid home. That was a big Braves thing, make sure you got everybody in the area. But I think there's a pedigree there. They didn't give him $3 million. because he sucks.
Yeah,
And it's
the stuff I think I didn't hear anywhere that his stuff backed up this season. Stuff
right.
maybe he was when he was drafted, the stuff was supposed to be better than Mazzucato's, but he didn't have the projection. Like he had already a major league ready body, so the stuff was the stuff. It wasn't going to get better, but it was fine. It was mid-90s fastball, and I like him. He added a changeup this year. I don't know if how much he had much of a changeup, but his changeup impressed me in the stints that I saw, and that's one of the reasons why I'm frankly kind of a little bit baffled by why his strikeout rate was so low. Because again, he was effective. It wasn't that he wasn't getting guys out. I would have thought he would have more strikeouts given that, and again, bring in some new coaches, figure out what's working for him. But I think the raw skill set is here for him to take a step forward next year.
Okay. I've got Nick Lofton at 10.
Okay. So my number 10 is Luca Tresh.
Okay.
Do you have him on your list?
I do not.
Okay, so let me make the case for Luca Tresh. So Luca Tresh was the guy that the Royals drafted in the 17th round last year, but was considered a top 100 prospect.
NC State catcher.
Yeah, and I was impressed that the Royals were able to sign it. They gave him a little over $400,000 to sign, made his major league. His professional debut. I guess he played a few games last year, but he essentially started out fresh this year. Went to high A ball straight out of the draft. That's a good sign. Hit 273, 360, 470. So decent average, good plate discipline, good pop. Was promoted to Double A in late August, and in 24 games, 253, 359, 462. No degradation at all in his performance in Double A for the year. 269, 360 on base, 468 slugging, 19 homers, 54 walks, 104 games. For a catcher, that is an impressive. He's only 22 years old. That is a very impressive first full season. I am a little concerned he only threw out 17% of base runners trying to steal. My understanding is that his catching skills, and by catching I mean pass balls, wild pitches, framing, etc., is good. The arm maybe needs some work. But I see him at the very least as a very good backup catcher in the major leagues. But if he takes even a slight step forward, this is a guy who can start in the major leagues. That could be a definite trade chip if the Royals, are settled with Salvador Perez and Melendez. But if he also gives them the option if they want to trade Melendez, and go with Salvador Perez and Tresh as sort of their kind of backup catcher working into an everyday role. I really feel like he's an underrated prospect in the system.
I went with Nate Eaton just because
I have him 11. So
that's who I have at 11. You had
who you had at 10? Who's your number 10?
10 was Nick Lofton.
Oh, okay. So Tresh. So now we're at 11, and we actually have that's rare to be this far down the list and have the same guy in the same spot. Yes, I have Nate.
Well, because I'm pretty proud of 12, but I think I'm more and more thinking we're going to land at the same spot. But because Nate Eaton, it's almost like I wanted to reward a nice performance. I looked at a couple of guys, and I really wanted to get some crafty young guy, and throw him in there. But I'm like, no, I'm gonna put Eaton in here.
See, to me, you know what? It's not just a reward. I get it. Yeah, absolutely, it is. I mean, here's a guy who was a 21st round draft pick, and I follow him like I follow all the Royals minor leaguers. He was out of college, and I was aware of him, but there was nothing particularly notable about his performance in the minor leagues before this season. I mean, last year in A-ball, as a 24-year-old, he hit 243 with 6 homers in half a season. Good plate discipline, played all around the field.
Well, that's why I feel like there's a place for him, because the plate discipline means that he should be able to hang numbers, and then I don't see him ever being a starter on the team. I see him as a utility player.
Yet here's
we had a question up here. Does he another guy without a position? I don't know. I mean, I'm a little more optimistic that he's a guy that can play several positions.
I was going to say they've had him play third base in the outfield this year, but unlike Hunter Dozier, who plays, they move him around based on where they can hide him. With Nate Eaton, I've been surprised on multiple levels. The first was that he went to Double A this year, he hit well. Went to Triple A, hit even better, and then got to the major. Like, he's definitely taken a step forward at the plate. And coming into today, 106 OPS plus in the major leagues, only 100 plate appearances, 115 plate appearances, but he has held his own. But here's the thing. His defensive numbers in the outfield are insanely good. He is a +5, +6 defender in the outfield in basically 20 games. I mean, that's Gerard Dyson level performance, and he has made multiple highlight plays. And these aren't just like fancy dive. These are the line drive where he reads the ball right off the bat, and it's going to drop in front. That's the hardest ball to judge, is that line drive in front of you. But he gets such a good break that he's able to catch up to it. His arm, I mean, he's thrown out 3 runners in 19 starts in the outfield, but MLB.com, I believe it was Mike Petriello, who's their stat guru. They put up a list of the strongest outfield arms in the major leagues just earlier this week. And it's based, I think, on like average velocity of their throws. Okay. And when he put together the list, Ronald Acuna was supposed to be number 1. But overnight, apparently, Nate Eaton had made enough throws to qualify for the list. Like, he hadn't qualified the list because he hadn't made the bare minimum of throws. So when the list actually was published the following morning after he had finished his article, Ronald Acuna was number 2 because Nate Eaton had the strongest throwing arm of any outfielder in the majors. On top of that, he has 11 steals in 12 attempts in 41 games, most of those coming off the bench.
And they're going to limit the number of throwovers, which makes that skill set now more valuable.
Well, but think about it, like a 21st round college player who, the image I have in my head is like a heady guy who, doesn't have great tools, but like can, knows baseball. They need a 21st round draft pick has like a top of the scale throwing arm and like elite speed and can play like multiple defensive positions. So they've been playing him at third base to see, can he play there? And he's played it okay. In the minor leagues, he played all over the place. He was drafted as a catcher, actually. It's like, I kind of just want to be like, who is this guy? Nate Eaton has been more valuable by wins above replacement than MJ Melendez is all season because he can play defense, he can run, and he's a decent hitter. Now, question is he actually even a decent hitter? If he's a league average hitter, great. I don't think he is, but I think the other things he provides to play all around the field, I actually think this guy could be a very useful guy off the bench for the next several years.
I'm with you. I don't know why he was sitting where he was, other than, I mean, at VMI, 284, 362, 444 is next year 287, 402, 507. I don't know what, if he clocked what he can steal now and what he threw at. I'm kind of shocked. Why was this guy sitting around forever? You mentioned catching being part of it, but even that, I mean, that you would have been like, okay, we've got something here. So I don't know where he fits or how he fits, but I'm with you. I like all the skills, and I think that there's a spot as a utility player for this guy. So I think that's big. I do want to address, Matt said, I love this one. I wonder what PFF graded his arm. They're not living that down anytime soon. And he said, isn't Eaton 26? He's 25. He'll be 26 after the season. Right. So he will be 26 next year. Matt also said, Matt's always quite active in the chat room, which we appreciate. He said, I just don't think he's going to stick. He screams Paul Orlando. Well, Paul Orlando stuck and was part of a championship club, right? Like,
there are worse things he could be than Paulo Orlando.
Yeah. I think Matt, I get Matt's point. I think the problem is you see these prospect lists, and even I listen to the draft, and the 3rd or 4th round, and every comp is to a guy who's a 6-time All-Star, right? Like, that's not how it works. There's real All-Stars, not the jackasses that make the team because they got to have somebody. Real All-Stars, there's 15 in each league of guys that are no-brainers. Right. Then there's guys that are having a good stretch, or they're in the absolute peak of their career and they have a good year. Eric Hosmer's, Mike Moustakas' type of guys. But there's also the guys that round out your roster. And, that's what these guys are. And if Nate Eaton can do that for the league minimum for 3 years and a year or 2 of arbitration and round out your roster, that gives you the money to go spend in free agency. So I get where Matt's coming from. But this is what I like about our list is we're giving you real comps, not blowing smoke up everyone's ass saying, well, Boland's an ace and this guy, like I read all these prospect things all the time every year getting ready for fantasy baseball where we do a minor league draft. And it drives me crazy that everybody is comped out to Pedro Martinez or Roger Clemens or Randy Johnson.
I mean, I
And
get it. Your draft, you want to know what the absolute upside, but the reality is you don't, if 10% of those guys turn out like that, that's terrific, right? Yeah, you need Paul Orlando's on your team to win, right?
yeah,
The other thing is also Paul Orlando was 29 when he got to the majors, so Orlando it's unusual to
but he
be.
ran track in Brazil.
And I mean, to some degree, that there was probably something to that. I mean, he came into baseball. Lorenzo Cain didn't play until he was a junior in high school, right? Like there is some validity to a guy taking longer to develop when he didn't play against high level competition until he was in his 20s.
You ready for
So
number 12?
I am. I'm trying to remember because you didn't have Luca Tresh on your list.
That's right.
Who is it that you had on your list that I didn't have? Oh, Bolin. Okay. Yes. So
Yeah,
so
Jonathan
to this
Bolin.
point, we're only one person that we disagree on. So who do you have at number 12?
Tony said, how sad is it that Asa Lacy is nowhere on these lists? He's at number 12 on my list. Asa Lacy. Did you go there?
I did not, but
Okay.
I'm glad you did. I'm glad somebody needs to bring them up because the stuff is still there.
Yeah. I mean, well, I don't know if it is. I mean, he's being hidden, in a dark room somewhere, soft tossing, socks or something. I remember the whole Rick Ankiel thing. They had him in a dark gym throwing where no one could see him when they were trying to fix him from the yips. His career may be over, and that will be horribly sad if it is. But this was a top 5 pick, and I said this, and I remember I upset Sam McDowell because of it. I said, with Asa Lacy may ride the future of this regime. The whole regime's not out. We'll see who ends up going. JJ Picollo has been put in charge. But I made that statement very early in the year when he was struggling and the Royals got off to a bad start and the pitching wasn't there. And I believe that there are about 3 or 4 things that brought about the change of Dayton Moore at that position. And I think it was things that we have talked about all year. I think it is Asa Lacy being lost and an owner saying, can I really entrust this man? We're going to have another top pick. If this guy doesn't turn around, can I trust him to make that selection? Can I trust him with the development people? I think it was Frank Mazzucato struggling early. I think it was the Toronto episode, which I've explained to people. I said, it's not that, oh my God, we can't get beyond it. You can get beyond it. It's that guys wouldn't play for Dayton Moore. They wouldn't do what was necessary. I think
And
they
they would
realized
do it,
that
and as we know now, they would do it for
they
other
would do it for
organizations.
others. Yes,
Right.
exactly.
Right.
And I think that was the one. And I expressed that to somebody in the Royals organization. I said, I don't know that Dayton Moore survives this. And they said, you think he's getting fired because of this? And I don't understand why people can't get their arms around the big picture. I said, no, he doesn't get fired because of this. This is not even the last straw, but this is the straw that will allow ownership to no longer give the benefit of the doubt. I think Dayton Moore is such a nice human being, such a quality individual. I said, this is the one that makes ownership and the organization look foolish to the rest of baseball. And that will strip the defenses of being able to always say, well, but Dayton's won a championship. There's always a reason to give the benefit of the doubt. And I said that this changes it. When you make an owner look foolish, it changes his outlook. And then he starts, instead of saying everything, giving the benefit of the doubt, well, let's wait. Lacy's got the stuff. He's left-handed. It takes some time. It all changes to everything being graded in and of itself. And there are too many things that are behind pace. And, Asa Lacy should be, for a quality pitching crew, I'm not going to say an easy, quick fix, but it should be something that turns very quickly. Whatever the problem is, has got to be there on video. The stuff is there. We know the pedigree is there. This has to get fixed right away. And unless he's just completely lost with the yips, and guys do get lost every year in baseball to that, then I think they will bring him back. And at the very least, he'll be a power reliever, which is what Dayton said. That was the other thing that scared the crap out of everybody. He's going to be part. Don't know if he's a starter or reliever. You don't take him in the top 5 to be a reliever. But I'm going to bank on what everybody said was one of the top arms out there. that somebody will get him fixed, and he'll rocket back up this
Right.
list.
And look, I mean, at this point, look, his draft position, it's a sunk cost, right? Maybe a power reliever is not worth the fourth pick in the draft, but who he is today, if you told me he turned into, you think of Andrew Miller, who very, very similar in that it was a top draft pick, and the Tigers sort of, Dave Dombrowski was always good about knowing who to trade and who not to. And he was one of the centerpieces of the Miguel Cabrera trade. I brought Miguel Cabrera to Detroit. They got a Hall of Famer, and the Marlins got Andrew Miller, who never panned out there, but turned into a absolute difference making, like the kind of guy who in the playoffs, where it dictated the terms of how a series would go. How many innings can Andrew Miller pitch in today's game? I mean, the Cleveland Indians almost won the World Series in 2016 because of that. Or Josh Hader is the other guy. Like it could be, he has the kind of stuff where both of those guys, even in the bullpen, they still walked guys. Not at this point, but they walked 3.5 to 4 guys per 9 innings. Like you could get on base if you worked, but they were striking out like 16 guys per 9 innings. And, you get a left-hander who can throw 2 innings at a time, give you 80 innings during the season, and then in the postseason, maybe give you, 7 or 8 innings in a series. That's a very valuable commodity.
Well, and that we talk about transactional, that the Royals have to become more that way, but they have to identify who to trade, and they got to start beating some people in trades, just flat out shipping guys that don't have it and getting back guys that do have it, and they've shown signs of being able to do it.
More Drew Waters, please. Yes, exactly.
JJ Picollo was given credit for that. Like that's John Sherman at the press conference said JJ was the guy behind that trade, and so you're optimistic that he will quickly identify. And I think this empowers the organization when you make a change. If that's what he needs is to be a 2-pitch guy, and what screwed him up was trying to justify the draft pick with him up there. It's not JJ Picollo is involved in the selection, but it's not his pick, and he should be emboldened to say, you're a reliever. We're going to get you up. You're going to be a 6-out weapon, a 9-batter weapon that we're going to have and blow people away. And so those are the things that have to change under JJ Picollo.
Yeah, I agree. But I think, I didn't have him on my list, but it was definitely a consideration. Asa Lacy, the upside is still there. Maybe not as a starter, but as a reliever. And if he hits his upside as a reliever, I think we'll be very happy he's still in the organization in 2 or 3 years. And that's the sort of guy, especially if you get to the postseason, those guys, the value of them is elevated in October when there are so many more days off. And so you can use relievers. During the season, you might use them in 40% of your games, but in the postseason, you're suddenly using those guys in 60 or 70% of your games because you rarely play more than 3 days in a row. And a lot of times you don't play more than 2 days in a row. Yeah. So he's not my number 12, but I totally get it. My number 12 is Peyton Wilson.
Okay.
And Peyton Wilson was the 2nd-round pick in last year's draft, not this year's draft, out of Alabama. Another guy who he played 51 games at second base and 35 games in center field this year. Kind of another kind of Whit Merrifield type where he can play multiple positions. A fair amount of speed, stole 23 bases this year. Is in the high A ball. His overall numbers, not great, but not bad. 268 batting, 359 on base, 456 slugging. So again, not a great batting average, but power, 14 home runs in 88 games, walks, 41 walks. And like I said, the speed, 23 of 25 in stolen bases. I like guys who demonstrate that skill set. The batting average will come. His strikeout rate is not terrible. It's right around 24% or so. But if you break down his season, it actually looks a lot better because he actually struggled a lot the first 2 months of the year. From June 1st on, he hit 300 with a 397 OBP and a 510 slugging. So from June 1st to the end of the year, 62 games, he had a 908 OPS in A-ball in his first full year in professional baseball. 22 years old, 2nd-round pick, so high pedigree. And he's a switch hitter. So there's a lot of skills to like here. And what I thought was interesting when I put this list together.
He's a month away from being 23.
Yeah, okay. I mean, he played his age 22 season. He's a year younger than Tyler Gentry. He's a year younger than Nick Lofton, who I think he's on the Nick Lofton path. And might a year from now might be a better prospect than Lofton. But by putting him on this list, I didn't realize this till afterwards. But 5 of the 12 guys on my list, Peyton Wilson, Luca Tresh, Ben Caderna, Frank Mazzucato, Carter Jensen, were all drafted last year. And for all the crap the Royals got for like taking an unknown guy with the 7th pick in the draft, they did manage to spread the money around. And all those guys were, high dollar guys. And they're all on my top prospect list. There's a chance we may look back at that draft and be like, the Royals didn't actually screw this up nearly as badly as we thought they did.
No, and it should look that way, because that's what it's supposed to be.
Right.
Right?
That's
Like
what
that,
they need to do. They need to
yeah.
beat other teams at their own game. And so
Well,
I'm excited.
and that's what the plan was for that draft.
Right.
Was to splash more cash around on, throw more lottery tickets at it, high-end lottery tickets, and come away with more players, maybe not a star, right?
Right.
And that's what it was for. All right. I like it. I like it. Some names to look at, some stuff to get to. 2 more games to play. Of course, we'll wrap up the season. We got a lot more stuff planning. Had some people ask us, are we going to do it in the offseason? The answer is yes, we are going to do it in the offseason. Might take on a little different form. Probably not going to go 85 minutes on a regular basis. I will tell you that everything may not be live, but we will be doing the Kaufman Corner throughout the course of the season. So that's going to do it for us today. Anything else you want to close with? I didn't mean to shut us
No,
down.
I think that's it. We'll talk on Sunday, and I think Sunday we'll tape, and
Yes, because
2
we have a
games.
Monday night game for the Chiefs.
Right,
So.
exactly. So Sunday will work. I don't expect much to happen on the field the next 2 days, but I am hopeful that we will see some personnel announcements between now and Sunday night that we will be able to discuss.
Yes,
and that would, I think, for multiple reasons, I think you and I would like to see that happen.
and we'll throw out some love. The Quaff Bar and Grill. Talk about it's where every umpire crew eats dinner after games. At least did for years and years and years. So great to have the folks at the Quaff checking in and listening. Thanks to everybody for checking us out via the podcast, via the stream, YouTube, Twitch, and also on what am I forgetting? YouTube, Twitch, and
Twitter.
Well, no, but the ones that you can comment with, YouTube, Twitch, and Facebook. You're able to comment. So if you want to catch us that way, go ahead and hit us up when we do stream live, usually Sundays at 10 p.m. So for the good doctor, Rany Jazayerli, my name is Soren Petro, and thank you very much for joining us here on Kaufman Corner.